Hi, welcome to the Macworld podcast. I'm Leif Johnson, standing in for Roman Loyola, who is out right now. And over here on remote, we have Michael Simon out on the East Coast. And because this is such a tradition here, we have the most important man in the room. That's Dan Masaoka.
Good
And
morning. Lay's very excited to be
Yeah, this
hosting
is.
today. Yeah, it's like,
that's right. And he
uh,
is the
we
most important man
we
in
we
the.
got all that, but what episode number is it?
Well, if that, yeah, it is episode 629 under Money My
Okay.
Authority. So no, it's I was good, but yes, episode 329. We're gonna be talking about, we got the review units, some of them. We got the iPhone 10R. We've done the Mac Mini. We've got the MacBook Air, and today, hopefully, we're getting the iPad Pro. So it's gonna take a while, but I'll be reviewing that. But and we're also going to talk about Apple stock prices and stuff like that, and what's going up with these price increases. So it should be really interesting. We got a lot of stuff to cover, and we got fewer people to talk about it with. But once again, most important man in the room, you have Dan Masaoka. He will be
that's
taking.
me again.
That's right. He'll be taking your questions, both from Twitter and
How
YouTube.
come I don't get introduced twice?
And it was I didn't know if I finished introducing him before. So yes, because he is the most important man in the room, and so gotta make sure we get that out of the way. So to kick off here, before we talk about Apple's own stuff and everything, just want to remind you that we have a giveaway right now. We are partnering with Razer, and we're teaming up with Razer, and we're giving away a Razer Core X eGPU. This is something that you can plug like into this 13-inch MacBook Pro and make it into a totally awesome gaming machine. It'll be okay actually, but currently the card that we have in there, you will also be getting a card with it that is a Sapphire Pulse Radeon RX 580, and you'll also be getting a Bluetooth mouse from Razer. That's all in this one package. That's about like a $700 deal. Nice thing about this, as you can see in some of my previous eGPU coverage, you can also stick like a Vega in there, a Radeon Vega, and then you'll be really seeing some power with that. Sadly, as you can see in some of my previous coverage, it mainly, kind of like affects games and stuff. If you try to go into video, it's a little bit rougher. Some of it still isn't supported, so that's kind of sad. But if you're looking for a boost in your graphics performance, this will really do it, and you can get it for free. This is nice, and it is actually one of my favorite eGPUs for the Mac. So I'm actually happy to see that.
Especially now that nothing has a discrete GPU
I
for
was
Apple
just gonna say
anymore,
that.
right?
So, by the way, we have that contest ends on Monday at 11:59 p.m. Pacific. So just hop on that. You can get additional chances to win by, subscribing to some of our other stuff, and good chance if you're watching this, you're already subscribed. So there are other ways to do it too. But anyway, so Mike here has been, playing around with the iPhone 10R. He was really in love with this thing coming up, as we were approaching the iPhone 10R's release, because all the rest of us got iPhone 10X and iPhone 10X Max. But he was really looking forward to
I
this.
just wanted to be different.
Yeah, and I'll just say right off the bat that there's a comment from Cherry Berry on Twitter that says, saw the 3 suggestions to improve the 10R on YouTube and would absolutely agree.
Yes, and awesome. And so what are those?
Yeah, so I wrote two things. I wrote a full 10R review, which it's a great phone.
Mhm.
I am used to Android, so it took some getting used to Apple again.
Mhm.
But listen, for the price, it's a fantastic phone. It's not the 10S. It's not cutting edge like those phones, and it doesn't have an OLED screen.
Mhm.
Doesn't have a dual camera. But what Apple did here is they really kind of looked at those premium products. They said, all right, how can we make $1,000 phone in a $750 phone body? And the corners they cut aren't really corners being cut. The LCD screen is fantastic. The single camera does more work than ever because you can do portrait mode. They're using computational photography more than ever. So you're not really downgrading. You're just getting a cheaper phone that looks, works, and really kind of runs like the iPhone 10. It's a great phone. I say it's Apple's best when I know that's going to get under people's skin because it's not technically. Obviously the 10s has better everything screen. The OLED versus LCD, the camera versus dual versus single,
Mhm.
but for that price point, the storage, what they did to create this phone is just fantastic.
So leading up to this, leading up to
Yeah.
the release, when we had the announcement, you were seemed pretty convinced that this was going to turn out to be the best-selling phone that Apple releases this year. Do you
Yeah,
still think that?
absolutely. There's no question. I honestly, I
Hmm.
think that people are going to go in the Apple store and say, I want a 10s and walk out with a 10R. It's that good.
You th-
Yeah.
well, I was just gonna say because I feel like there were some rumors that they weren't selling as many or demand wasn't as many. Do you find any truth to that? And I'm also curious, Leif. You were also on the side that you thought that they would sell tons of these as well. I'm still on the side. I think people who buy Apple products tend to buy the higher end stuff,
Hmm.
and I still think the 10s models will sell more,
Hmm.
but could be wrong still.
One of the, I have this real idealistic view and stuff. We'll talk about this later in the podcast. But Apple's prices just keep going up, and you were talking about. I think that's one reason. I know some friends, and that's the main reason that they've gone to Android devices. They personally think the
Mhm.
Apple products are better, but
And listen, there are plenty of $1,000 Android phones.
yes, exactly. But there
There's just
are more
there's more
Android phones.
options.
Yes, exactly, that are available on that lower end. It's
Yeah.
getting harder and harder to do that with Apple, and I like to see this phone because it's kind of like a gesture of goodwill. It's showing here we will give you a modern phone as opposed to
Right.
forcing you to stick with an older model if you want to save a few bucks. And it's basically the same phone, just doesn't have as cool of a screen. It doesn't have that telephoto lens. And I think considering some of the criticism leveled at Apple recently, that's pretty impressive.
I agree.
Yes, it is true that as me being me, but of course I work for Macworld. I really did want to get the OLED screen on an iPhone 10x. 10s.
Yeah, and if you're comparing them side by side, there is an obvious difference.
I
The
was going to
OLED
ask that. If you could tell it, yeah.
You have to, but you have like on a day to day, like one side wasn't holding it up to the 10 or the Note 9 or whatever OLED phone I had lying around.
Hmm.
It's your eyes don't see, it's still retina, so you don't see the pixels.
Uh-huh.
The color is really good. The curved corners make a huge difference. It's a small thing,
Hmm.
but versus the square edges on the iPhone 8 and earlier, this really feels like a modern screen. It's bright, it's crisp, the colors are super accurate. You don't get those deep blacks that you get with an OLED. The colors pop more on the OLED screens. That's just a fact of life. No matter what Apple does to LCD, they're not going to get it as good. But it's not a subpar screen, particularly for a 720p screen. It's very impressive.
I think I remember one of us saying, that if you haven't experienced an OLED screen yet, especially on an Apple device, you're probably still really super going to be
Yes.
impressed by that display.
Absolutely. And even if you have experienced OLED, as long as you're not using them together,
Hmm.
it's your eyes aren't going to say, "Oh, this is ugly." It's a really nice screen.
The nice thing about that display too is, it doesn't, there's the power, comparison, and the smaller screen, especially compared to the 10s Max. But I hear that you've been getting a lot of good battery performance out of that. So.
Yeah, the battery is just it blows me away. It's I was getting 7, 8, and some days 9 hours of screen on time, which is just bonkers. I mean, it's nuts. I push, my Beat is mobile, so I use these things all day long. I'm constantly have my phone on. I'm constantly using them more than most people would.
Hmm.
At the end of a day, using this phone as my daily driver, that includes streaming and maps and everything else that you can possibly want to do with it. I never had to plug it in before I was ready to go to sleep.
Nice.
That's not the case of any other phone except for the Galaxy Note 9, which has a 4,000 milliamp hour battery and is monstrous. This, I mean, for a 6.1-inch phone with the 2,900 milliamp hour battery, it's amazing what Apple has been able to do to optimize this phone to get 12, 15, 20 hours of battery life. It's crazy.
Do you know how it compares to the 10s Max? Because
Yeah, I mean, based on just simple benchmarks, it's about, I think it was about 45 minutes to an hour longer
nice.
than the Max. But the benchmarks are benchmarks.
Right.
Real world testing
Hmm.
is where it's at. And I've tested these phones all year long. That's my job.
Hmm.
And Android has 3,000, 3,500, 4,000, 4,200 milliamp hour batteries, and this one can hang with all of those, even though it's 2,900. It's fantastic. And I wish Apple would put a 3,800 milliamp hour battery in one of these things just to make it last like a week.
Yes.
Because if they put 30% more battery size in there, what they could do with it is crazy.
Yes.
Would you rather have that or a replaceable? Not that the Apple would ever do that, but a replaceable battery. Because I feel like, have you come across a modern flagship phone that in the first few months doesn't have enough juice to go pretty much your whole day?
No. Some of them I'll have to plug it in at 8 o'clock for 20 minutes to get a little bit more.
So nothing's been a problem when they're new, So I feel like it's really the issue is, a year or 2 years down the line.
Yeah, over time, yep.
I felt like when I got my 7 Plus, I still, just to be on the safe side, needed to carry a battery pack. A power bank. I don't really feel that with my 10X Max, and I was surprised by that. And I do spend a lot of time looking at my phone. I listen to a lot of music. But I haven't had that. But at the end of the day, it's still got like half power on it. And
well, I don't quite have that, but I was comfortably in like 15 to 20%.
Okay.
By the end of the day.
And it's
yep.
Sorry, just to jump kind of onto the article you wrote about the 3 features.
Yeah.
Prizzy Bilak, I'm probably killing that name on YouTube, is saying, is there any chance for full 3D touch by long pressing?
It seems as though that's something that they could add. It wouldn't be 3D touch. It's not the same mechanism.
Yeah. Well, it's quotation marks.
I'm surprised there's someone that actually likes 3D touch.
Well, here's the thing about 3D touch. It wasn't utilized in the right way, but it's a cool mechanism.
Uh-huh.
And the things that Apple, so they have this thing called haptic touch now, which uses their haptic engine, which has always been the best in the business as far as not being too vibration-y, but just enough, and it really works with the system. It's all synced properly. I'm a big fan of Apple's haptics. So what they're doing is that you can see it in a couple of areas on the lock screen in the control center. You can tap to open it, or you can press a little bit harder to do another function, like turn on a flashlight or turn on True Tone in the volume and the brightness settings. And it's not as deep as the 3D touch. It's a different type of feel, but it's only on a couple of things. And what I'd really like to see is Apple add it to the app icons like 3D touch had, where you press it and you got a list of your recent contacts or whatever it was that the developer or Apple built into it. Android phones have this. They don't really have that 3D touch mechanism, but they do have what's called app shortcuts. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably going to be an iOS 12.3 or an iOS 13 feature, because it can be done. First of all, that home screen wiggle nonsense, like, just get rid of it already. Like, what are we doing with that still in 2018? It's the stupidest thing. Why do I have to delete every single app but I want to just delete one?
Yeah.
Like that's crazy. So make a system where I can hold on an app and put the option to delete it in a menu that pops up. Like it seems to me like it would be very simple to implicate.
I'll say, because they
implement, not implicate. Sorry.
I think it's probably more to do with this, like, less about deleting than about sorting why they do it all, because you're forced into such a rigid system that I think it's like, just to move one thing, it's like, okay, now I'm moving half my icons around to get it back to where I liked it.
The main thing that bothers me is moving them to different screens. It's not.
Yes, the whole system is very inelegant, and I wish they would just give me an app drawer, get rid of it, make it unlimited scrolling, whichever way you want to do it, left, right, up, down. I don't care. Get rid of these home screens, please.
Yeah. I would also say, because my last iPhone was the 5S, which I was on for so long, that like, now that I have 3D touch, I like it. I don't know when I can use it, and I think that's the issue.
That's a good point.
But that's exactly right.
But when I do use it, I'm like, oh, that's actually kind of cool. But it's not gonna. It doesn't come naturally for me to think about it like that. So I don't.
That's because Apple never really developed like a uniform system. Like, some icons work, some don't. Some have cool features, some have useless features. Like, they don't really tell you. They never really sold it as here's 3D Touch, and these are the things that it can do, like Siri. Like when you turn on Siri, it says, here are some of the things I can do.
Yeah.
They don't really tell you that with 3D Touches. You're kind of on your own to figure out what it does, when it does it, and why you should do it. I mean, most people don't know about the, you can turn your keyboard into a trackpad using 3D Touch. Most people don't know that, although that does exist on the 10R as well. You can hold the space bar, and it does the same thing.
Very nice.
Do you think it's because they've had so many models, and since it's not kind of universal, they can't just be like, oh, everyone, this is,
maybe.
I don't know.
But possibly. I mean, I just think it's more of Apple does a lot of things because they can, I think. And then they kind of lose focus on, what the point of it was. And then 5 years down the line, they just do away with it. So I just think it was one of those things that it was cool. They could do it. They did it. And then they never really kind of developed it into a bona fide shortcut system. I think the same thing's going to happen with Siri shortcuts, if you ask me. But that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, that's cool, but even I wrote that article. It's pretty popular on the best Siri shortcuts and stuff. I haven't really used any of those, and
I don't even. I have to go. I haven't even really. I downloaded it because I had to, but I haven't opened it since the first time I did it.
I don't use Siri, so.
It's just kind of there are a lot of stuff where you wouldn't even use the voice. It is literally just a shortcut, and so there's some cool things that take some steps out. And everything. One thing I was interested by, you said that there was no, first-party case for the iPhone XR, and so not only to me, I don't know, something about a lower-cost phone. Maybe I'm being, I don't know, someone's classes or something like. But it's almost like you're going to, have a bigger chance of breaking it because you're kind of looking at it more of a rough and tumble device.
I mean, I don't think so. I don't think it's a rough and I don't think it's a low end. I don't think anyone who buys it is going to treat it just as well as they treat a 10s. But the Apple's selling it in 5 or 6 or however many colors. I mean, if you're going to buy a blue one or a red one or a yellow one, you're going to want to show off that color, I would think.
Yeah.
I mean, I have the blue one, and I've been using it without a case now for a couple of weeks. I do not baby anything I have.
But you never use a case.
I throw it around. I don't use a case at all.
Either way.
And I throw it in my pocket. I have keys in there. I have other phones in there. I throw it in my cup holder, and it looks just as good as it did on the first day I got it. So the glass is very durable. It's I don't even have really any micro scratches. I have a couple on the aluminum, very small, very unnoticeable. You have to really kind of shine it in a light to see it. So I think Apple just said, you know what, we're going to build a durable phone that people are going to want to use without a case. Nice. Maybe they'll come out with a clear one down the line. That's the only thing that I could see happening.
So do you care that there's actually or not existing a first party case?
No, I don't care. I just mentioned it in the sense that I think people are going to use it without a case. I think that.
Okay.
I thought that was and it's just because I'll be honest with you, I had a case on my 5C. So that gives you an idea of how.
Well, back then they made those cases for it. They had a whole. They had those little holes in it, and they had color matching.
I didn't get that one, but So
I mean, listen, if you like phones in cases, like for example, my wife, I'm going to give this phone to her in a week after I'm done with one more article. And she's going to absolutely have a case because she likes using cases. If you like using cases, there's nothing wrong with having one.
I don't
I think if you're on the fence and you're buying one because you're afraid of breaking it, I think maybe people will say, you know what, I'm going to try it for a couple of months and see if I need one.
Yeah.
Coral Reef on YouTube says you got to try your hardest to break it.
Yes. I wish we had that budget.
Listen, I paid for this one. I'm not breaking it.
See, that's a thing. Here at Macro, we often have to pay for our stuff. So we're as invested in this as you are.
That's also why we don't buy first-party cases.
Right, exactly. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So
just to circle back quick to that other article that I wrote alongside the review.
Yeah.
So the first thing that we talked about already was the 3D Touch, and I would like to see Apple add app shortcuts. I'd also like to see Apple add an ambient display, an always-on display, which drives me out of my mind that they don't have this yet. What that is I can show you here. This is the Pixel. So that is always on.
Yeah.
It's against a black screen. It shows the time and shows notifications and a couple of other things if you can customize it. Apple wouldn't allow that. It would be time and icons to show you if you have a notification coming in. As it stands, unless you have Do Not Disturb on, when you get a notification, the whole damn screen lights up. Yeah. In the middle of the night, wherever you are, it doesn't matter. And it's insane. So I want an ambient display on all of the iPhones, but particularly the one because I used it. Mm-hmm. I think it would go a long way toward making it feel more like a modern phone. It would kind of trim that gap between Android and Apple with the customization, and it would make people really happy.
But as far as the always on screen goes, I feel like that kind of came about a couple of years ago with like Samsung and LG because they were going OLED. Like, is how much of that has to do with that technology difference?
It helps because you can turn off all those pixels, but you can do it. You can just do ambient where you need to raise it to see it. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't have to be always on. And there are plenty of LCD Android phones that do always on. They just make it very, 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 very dim. Mm-hmm. So you can see the time, but it's not as bright as an OLED. But it's fine. It still works. It's still there, and the battery drain is nominal, particularly when you're lighting up the whole damn phone to send a notification. And the third thing is the camera. We didn't talk about the camera. So single versus dual. The cool thing is it still does portrait mode, and it does portrait mode really well. Like I was surprised with how good it was. I compared it against the Note 9, which is a dual camera, one of the best you can get, and the Pixel 3, which is a single camera, but they've been doing some really incredible work with AI and computational photography, and Apple's really nailed it here. They the blur effect, the bokeh mimicking is just fantastic. You can adjust it before and after the fact. Also on the 10R, you don't need the dual camera to do that. And I took a bunch of pictures, all kinds of light, and it was all very impressive the way they did it. They were able to nail, where the person ended, where the background began, and just great. But you can only use it with people. Yeah. So if you want to take a picture of your pet, a flower, whatever, like some little figurine you have in your own, you can't do it. And it drives me crazy. And, I guess they did it because it wasn't perfect. Mm-hmm. But, people want to use it for that stuff. As much as they want to take a picture of their kid or their wife or husband, they want to take a picture of, like things.
Yeah, but I feel like that has a lot more. I mean, because like so far, Apple's used the technology of having two cameras to really create the effect, right? Yeah. And I feel like this is the one case where they're applying it to phones with one lens or one camera, I should say. And I wonder if it's worth, in their opinion at least, the investment in like engineering resources to go down this path. Because like for Google, the Pixel, it's like, okay, it makes sense because it's just this is the only phone they do, and they need to perfect that. But for Apple, it's like, you know what? We should just encourage people to buy a phone that has two lenses.
I can't imagine anyone's going to pay $250 more for the phone just to take a picture of their dog, but maybe.
I saw a lot of tweets to that effect, actually. So.
But that's just why it's like it's not going to, from the engineering resource, it's not worth them going down that path of focusing.
Maybe so. Maybe you're right. But anyway, to that, they do the portrait mode on the 10R is fantastic. The camera is awesome. Mm-hmm. You lose out on the 2x optical zoom, which is noticeable when you compare it against an optical zoom, but it's still really good. Mm-hmm. If you take a lot of zoom photos, you're going to want to probably get the 10S, but if you just take a couple here and there and you take a lot of people portraits, the 10R will be just, you're not going to notice the difference. It's really good.
And you could always buy an external lens for
also true.
Like $50.
Yeah, that's true.
There is a question on YouTube asking about the bezels. Mm-hmm. And they specifically, give it's moved from 34.5 to 35.1. This is Prizzy Bialek again. What's your brutal feeling? Because I remember when the video came out and they announced, I was like, oh man, that bezel looks huge.
It is. It's thick. It's the thickest you're going to find on any phone, really. I can't think of one that has. It looks like it's from like I don't know 2010. They're really thick.
So that's a big difference.
What makes them bearable is two things. One, that all screen symmetrical design.
Uh-huh.
So you don't have a chin and a forehead. It's a uniform bezel all the way around. And the second thing is those curved corners. I said it before, I'll say it again. They make a huge visual difference when you're looking at that screen. You don't have those jarring corners that create that right angle on the edges. It makes a big difference. And you know what? The bezels are a physical difference that once you use it, you don't really notice it. As you're using the phone, they're you don't stare at the bezels as you're using it. It's a superficial thing that, when you hold it, you show to someone, that's the first thing they see. Once I started using it for a couple minutes, really, like I didn't pay attention to them at all. It's like a laptop. There's huge bezels, but once you start using it, you don't focus on them. You just focus on the screen.
Well, I don't know. With the new MacBook Air, it's really nice.
I kind of teed that up for you.
Yeah, I was hoping for that. Yeah. So with the new MacBook Air, which Jason reviewed, and Jason's out with the flu, so unfortunately he can't give us his own expert advice on this. But the old MacBook Air used to have these big old 2010 bezels around it,
and they were silver, no less.
Yeah. See, that was the thing. They were silver. They were distracting as heck.
Yeah, they really were.
But no, that's gone away. And matter of fact, the way Jason put it is basically the new MacBook Air is basically a 13-inch, 12-inch MacBook, and it's got Touch ID. It's got got a nice screen and stuff like that.
I got to tell you, man, that I'm a little jealous of the Touch ID with the regular function bar. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
I wish I had this on this 13-inch Pro I have, because the Touch bar is completely useless.
It's nice if you haven't used it before. The Touch ID. You're gonna use it for passwords and stuff. I often don't notice it because I wear an Apple Watch, and that automatically unlocks my phone. But automatically unlocks my Mac. But it's nice. When you're entering passwords and everything, it functions basically like it does on the phone.
It's a cool feature. It's in the top right corner of the keyboard, and it's great.
So, but as far as the keyboard itself, Apple went back to the old butterfly keyboard, for this. And so that took away the very thing that I think a lot of people loved about the MacBook Air and why it had such a long lifespan, in the product line, is because it still had that old pre-butterfly keyboard. And do you think that them removing that is going to hurt the MacBook Air, especially since the 12-inch MacBook
I don't know. I wonder how many people bought the MacBook Air because of nostalgia.
Yeah.
And now it's a MacBook Air in name only, essentially, in my mind. Yeah, it's a MacBook, as Jason says, and you're not getting anything really that you aren't getting in the MacBook. It has a similar design. It has USB-C. It has slim bezels. It's a nice computer. But what is it? What makes it a MacBook Air? Nothing. Yeah. They just took the name.
Yeah, and it's just because it's slimmer and stuff.
It's not slimmer than the MacBook.
Well, he pointed out that you could basically stick it on top of a 13-inch MacBook Pro, and you would tell no difference. In fact, the MacBook Air, if I remember correctly, the display is actually slightly thicker, and I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
It's very.
So
slight.
I don't know. I'm sure they'll sell them. It's a really nice computer. The processor is. Yeah. But it's a good storage, good RAM, good design, great screen.
Well, I was one of the people that was hoping for a genuine low cost entry. The other one started at $999. This one starts. I thought it was $1,100 at first. It's $1,200.
$1,200. Yeah. They still sell that $999 one, which is just laughable. Please don't buy that computer.
But when you look at yes, people shouldn't buy it. But when you look at it, it's like, from a CPU benchmarking speed, it's
true.
That's not that
true.
much slower.
Yeah.
Real quick,
that's a good point.
Rafael on Twitter is saying the MacBook Air is what the MacBook should have been.
That's true. I totally buy that. Yes, and that's why I would have liked to have seen a MacBook Air that was more kind of like entry level and stuff.
Yeah, a $999 Air, like whatever they would have had to do to get there.
Yes.
With this design would have been just killer. It still would have made the MacBook relatively obsolete and completely irrelevant, which they need to fix. All those computers there, those 13-inch and under computers, they need to figure out what the heck they're doing, because that is just a nightmare for someone trying to choose between those four computers. But if they would have made a $999 Air, replaced that model that they're still selling with this new design, somehow done that, it would have sold like crazy. That's $200 makes a big difference.
Especially, with all this talk about privacy and stuff, and you have students who would be using this device. This is something I was really looking forward to. Bring people into the Mac ecosystem with all of the talk about privacy, cool apps and everything. But they're making it more and more of a prestige device. I don't like, to an extent it always has been, but not like this. $1,200. Yeah.
I mean, well, the original Air was 18. That was insanity.
Yes, exactly.
If you remember that, but that was new and kitschy and Steve Jobs and everything else. I mean, that's why that was 18. No, that didn't take long to drop.
Yes.
So people are comparing and they're saying it's the cheapest new MacBook Air ever. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
But they're completely abandoning what became the MacBook Air target audience is once again left out in the cold.
And it just has 128 gigabytes to start off with at that price. To get a decent price, you got to bump up to 1,400, for 256 gigabytes, and that's still not a lot of room. I mean, when you look at what Windows is offering, like Dell XPS 13 and stuff, that's it's. If I were a student, it would be harder for me to make this kind of decision because it was like, 128 gigabytes. Yeah. My photos take up that much. No. But yeah, it's basically, like people said, it's been brought up to the standards of other Mac laptops. And that's.
Yeah, it certainly has. Yeah. And the same thing with the Mac Mini. I mean, that is now $800, which is the cheapest Mac, but it's $300 more than it was before.
Yeah.
And that it has decent specs, and it has it's way more advanced than it was a week ago. But is it it's not an entry level Mac. I don't care if it's $800. That's not something that someone's going to walk into a store and buy on an impulse. That's something you need to want, or you need to have.
Yes.
And Roman gave it a great review, and it's a for what it is. It's a good Mac. It's just, Apple's consistently pushing everything this way.
Right.
And then they ignore it. You're going to tell me the Mac Mini is going to be updated next year?
No, it's
3 years from now, maybe.
Yes.
So that, they give it to you at the front. So if you buy it now, you're getting an $800 computer, fine. If you buy it next year or 2 years from now, then that value degrades, and they're not going to lower the price.
But then everything else, all the MacBook and the MacBook Pro are going to be raised higher. So when you compare it, it'll look better.
Yeah, I guess so.
There's two good comments on Twitter that I wanted to bring up.
Okay.
And the first one, Jason would probably be that guy, but Rafalco says, for $100 more, you can get a MacBook Pro.
Yeah.
So why would I
agree.
That's a very valid point, right?
I mean, that's the perfectly adequate comment. The Pro has a better chip than the Air. Yeah. It's bigger. It's a little bit heavier. And that's the difference.
And that's what you were saying in the announcement of it. What is the point of this device?
They're making it so difficult for people to choose. But wait a minute, I'm getting a half an ounce less here. Oh, wait, this is an inch smaller. And it's just like, why are you making it unnecessarily confusing for customers? It's not a good buying experience for a 13-inch or lower Mac. 15-inch or higher is great.
Yeah.
You got the MacBook Pro, all different configurations, all that stuff, and then the iMac comes into play if you want that. That's great, but this smaller format notebook is just a mess.
And then the other question that on Twitter was from Joseph, who was saying, "What do you think is going to happen to the MacBook line now?"
I don't know. I mean, what I would like to see is that they release a $999 MacBook.
Same here. Yeah.
That gets rid of that overpriced, underpowered Air, gets rid of the underpriced, overpowered MacBook. Give me a $999 12-inch MacBook with whatever specs need to be in there to get me to that price, a $1,200 MacBook Air, and whatever the MacBook Pro is, $1,300. I mean, or make that $1,350, however you do it, but have those three configurations. Or make a $999 Air and get rid of the MacBook, because they're essentially the same computer anyway.
Yes. And I had Jason has it, and I haven't even had a chance to try out the MacBook Air, but I would appreciate it, because I have to admit I do actually enjoy writing on the 12-inch MacBook. It's actually my favorite. It seems like a very nice shape. I do, it's not as bad as you would think, but I did get kind of frustrated with that single USB-C port. But since it only has an SSD, it didn't suck up power, as much as the other one did. So the battery would actually last a long time. So, but that's the thing. In order to use something else with it, you have to plug something else in, which gets annoying. But yeah, I'd be interested in if I had a choice of buying one. I think I would probably get the Air. But
yeah, because it's new.
Yes,
and
exactly.
It's cheap. It's friggin' cheaper. I mean, it makes no sense.
Yes.
Give me a $999 MacBook. Like if Apple would have cut the price of the MacBook to $999, we wouldn't be having this conversation. That's all they have to do.
Right.
Is make the buying choice easier.
That is the simplest. That would have been the simplest choice. Yes.
I'm not mad at Apple for making a $1,200 Air. I'm not at all. I'm mad at them for unnecessarily creating confusion in the product line.
Maybe this is going to go like the same route the Mac Mini and the previous MacBook Air, or I should say the old Mac Mini, where it's just like they have it and it's not going to get upgraded for 5 years, but it's just going to be listed on their site. And if you want, for whatever reason, to buy that one, it's there. It exists.
That's fine, but don't gouge people.
Yes,
Make
exactly.
it, lower the price.
Well, I feel like they never did that with the other ones. They just left it, and they go like, well, it's just there.
Yeah.
That's true, but they didn't release a Mac Mini Pro that was $400 and gave you better specs. The Mac Mini was the Mac Mini. It was what it was. There was nothing around that price point. The Air has, or the MacBook and the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro, they're all within $100 of each other. And you really have to dive deep into the specs and figure out what you want to make that decision, and it shouldn't be that complicated.
Well, the other thing that's go ahead.
I was just going to say one quick thing about the Mini that I loved in Roman's review. The design was both a pro and a con, and he's totally right, because people like me wanted this this real modern like those Intel computers, something completely different. But people who buy the MacBook, the Mac Mini for racks, they want that form factor because they could put two in there and then slide it right in. So I totally get why it's both pro and con.
Yeah.
Wait, so what form factor did you want the Mac Mini to be in?
I don't know.
Sounds like we're changing topics.
Let Apple do its thing. Yeah.
I wanted something super portable that I could. Mac Mini is super portable, but I wanted something even more portable that I could throw in, a bag and carry around. It's something that's revolutionary, innovative. Yeah. The Mac Mini isn't innovative anymore.
And that's a 7x7 by 1.4. Yeah.
Yeah, which fits if you buy a rack mount made for it. You can fit two in there, perfect. It's the right height and it's the right shape, and that's basically why it is. And I understand that, but that doesn't mean I don't want something different and better and cooler.
At least they would had all the ports on there still. 4 USB-C, but two. I think it was 2 USB-C-A, the Ethernet and stuff. That's a better concession than what we've seen from some of the other.
Yeah, it's definitely a modern Mini.
Yes,
I'm sure, most certainly.
I was actually surprised that they kept Type A ports on it for some reason. I was like, nah, they're just going to put USB-C.
For a desktop, you got to have some kind of.
And they gave you HDMI, and I was like, nah, they'll just give you one mini display port, if that. And I was thinking you just get 4 USB-C, and that's all they're going to give you on the back.
They would have.
That was my prediction.
Off. Oh, that would have been bad.
Yeah, I think for the market, it's tailored to they have to have USB-A.
And I'm sure we'll see USB-A on the Mac Pro when it comes out too.
Oh,
so.
Yeah, definitely. There'll be more USB-C Thunderbolt ports, but they'll definitely. They need to have 1 or 2. That's the reality of the situation.
Yes. Everybody's talking about how they hope that the Mac Pro is customizable, and you couldn't even put, the idea is that you can supposedly upgrade the memory in the Mac Mini, but I know, Roman, did y'all have a chance?
It's not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy. You have to unscrew everything. You have to take off. Apple clearly doesn't really want you to do it. They want you to go into their store and.
I was with Roman, and it's definitely shrouded by a piece of metal. And it looks like you might have to remove the fan. Yes. So I'll be really curious when iFixit does like a complete teardown to see. Because I think, we didn't want to, go as far as where, we might not be able to put it back together because that happens.
If that's a concern, then this is not an upgradable machine.
Right, exactly.
The average person isn't going to be able to do that. And Apple says on its website, take it to a service place. They don't want you to try to do it on your own. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but I mean, it's the they give you you can do it. So at least there's that.
No.
It's not fused to the motherboard.
Yeah, I think that Mike, I'm really curious to see if there's a real legitimate reason, because the old one was so easy to do. You just literally twist off the back.
It was just a
and you
door.
swap.
Yeah.
But this one, I'm wondering, because they've upgraded, the CPU, is there a larger heat issue? And so there, like the fan has to be a lot larger, and so like because of that, there's just not that kind of room, or is it requiring more power now? And so,
I mean, if that's the case, then that speaks to what I wanted, which was a complete overhaul of what the Mac Mini is. If they needed to, if that's the case, if heat issues and fan issues and everything else, then don't give me the same design. Make it so I can upgrade it easily. Change it.
I'm curious if you had the choice between, because like the power supply is built into the unit, would you rather have the power supply externally on the power cord and have like a smaller actual Mac Mini, but then I should put that in quotation marks because it's using the external power supply, or do you like the fact that it is all kind of integrated?
I like the integration. I hate those big giant power bricks that we used to have.
And would that even work with the racks? That people have?
Yeah, also true. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's really what they're aiming for. That's because Apple usually is like, we don't, that's one of the big criticisms of them. They're usually like, we don't care that you were getting comfortable with this design and everything, in with the new USB-C and stuff like that. Here is a case in which they actually are trying to placate what they, think is their audience,
or
the rack people.
How many people? I'm still not buying this as we have so many people making rack.
Well, that was what we said in the last podcast. It was just like, here's the one group of people that have it.
I agree. I think it's just straight up laziness.
And that's sad. And we shouldn't expect that from Apple.
I mean, to be fair, there isn't a small PC that looks as good as it. So it is the same. But can you think of a mini PC that looks better?
No. I mean that. Yeah. I mean, Apple is always tops in its game per se. And yeah, for a 6 or 4 year old, however many years old it is when they redesigned it the first time and then kept it. Yeah, you're right. It was ahead of its time, and now it's still probably better than everything out there that you can get in that form factor.
And,
yeah. And I still Space Gray is silver.
But that's what we, I agree. It's not. Oh wait, you said you like it better?
No, I mean I just think to me there's no difference between Space Gray and silver.
I agree. It doesn't matter. I mean the Space Gray is fine. It's a matter of preference. But I mean here's the thing: Apple is generally ahead of the game. They're not looking at the landscape and saying, okay, we want to do that. They're saying that we're running this conversation. So we're going to create a Mac Mini that blows your mind, and then everyone's going to copy us for the next 5 to 10 years. And that's not happening here. It's the same thing. It's better, but it's essentially the same. It's a Mac Mini.
It's with a better processor. That's basically what it comes down to.
It's the same as it was when it was first introduced. The reason why it's thinner is because there's no more super drive. That was the difference.
And wasn't that 2005? And so
it was. I don't remember exactly, but it's been around. It's been around for.
So the last refresh was 2014. So this is one of the longest, basic form factors that Apple's had. And
speaking of innovation.
Yeah, speaking of innovation, Apple needs to do some innovation on its pricing structure. One of the things we've noticed, we had the quarterly report last week, and Apple's, its overall revenue reached 62.9 billion, which was a 20% year boost from the year ago quarter. However,
blah 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 blah.
Yeah, if you notice that iPhone still stayed the same. So
yeah, they were flat. I mean, it's a quarter where they were expected to stay flat. What was amazing is that revenue went up like 30%.
Yeah, average selling price is $793, beating $618 from the year ago quarter. It's I love Apple, but it really does seem like they're just boosting these numbers to
But here's the rub.
Okay.
Until there's blowback, until there's pushback, they're going to keep doing it. I don't think that they're gouging customers per se.
Right.
What I think they're doing is saying we're going to spare no expense, and we don't, people are going to pay 20% more, 30% more, in the case of the Mac Mini, 60% more, because they're going to get the best possible product that we're going to put out.
Yeah.
And, I take umbrage with that a little bit because Apple, as the iPhone and the iPod became popular, Apple started to understand that we need to, yes, have this affordable luxury that they call it, or someone calls it. But we're also going to give a $99 iPod. We're going to give the iPhone SE was what, $450. They catered to people below that luxury tier. Listen, it's a privilege to be able to afford an iPhone. I'm aware of that. I'm in a position where I can walk into a store and spend $1,000 on a phone. That not everybody can do that.
Yeah.
And Apple seems to be kind of forgetting
Yes.
that everybody wants a Mac. Everybody wants an iPhone. Everybody wants an iPad. That's just a fact. Maybe it's not a fact, but a lot of people want to buy these products, and Apple is, with each revision, is pricing out a little more of the market. And
the Mac is so far out now. I think that's hard.
And look at the iPad starts at $800. The iPad Pro starts at $800. Yes, they have a $329 one
with pencil support.
With pencil support, and it's a great little machine. But if you want to get the new design, it's going to cost you $800 plus pencil, plus keyboard, plus maybe more storage. I mean, you're looking at $1,500 on a friggin' iPad. I mean, come on.
Yes. And that's another thing to keep in mind too. With the Mac Mini is, those are the other peripherals that you got to buy too.
Yeah.
You got to buy a monitor, you got to buy a keyboard, you got to buy a mouse, and
it's going to be interesting to see going forward now that they're going to stop reporting numbers.
Yes.
They're not going to tell you how many iPhones they sell, how many iPads they sell, and to be honest, I'm surprised it took them this long.
Okay.
Because no one else does that.
Right. Yeah. And
they were unique. In telling people how many their major products that they sold. They stopped doing it with Apple Watch, and that was kind of a what do they call that, a canary in the coal mine, to see if there was any blowback, and there wasn't. People said, okay, fine, we'll just estimate it on our own. And people still understood that Apple Watch was selling more and more, and they say those 50% whatevers, 50% year over year, 50% month over month, they can give these kind of vague sales figures, and they're going to do the same thing with the iPhone. And, so now when in the holiday quarter, let's say they sell 75 million instead of 78 million, as long as that revenue stream keeps going up and that average selling price, we won't know that. But as long as the revenue keeps going up, no one's going to really necessarily focus on this minutia. And that's what Apple wants.
That is one of the things that worries me. It's just, it's taking it out. I think for Apple to be a successful brand, it needs to be able to stay, visible in front of more people, especially like Mac. That's the thing. Everybody's going to have an iPhone. That's the thing. But the wider system and stuff.
Yeah.
And I actually, I wish it ran games better, but I actually love using my Mac. And
Sure.
it's very the keyboard shortcuts, the integration with the actual machine. All of this I find a superior experience to what I get on Windows. But and then of course you have the privacy, and
it's not just the Apple Watch went up a bundle too. The keyboard went up, the pencil went up. I mean, everything across the board went up. And there may be it's because of tariffs, maybe it's because of cost of materials, maybe it's because of engineering and research and development costs and marketing. I don't know. All I do know is that we're paying a hell of a lot more for these things than they were this time last year.
You said it was about 20% more generally.
Yeah, at least that's the baseline. Some of them were, like I said, the Mac Mini went up $300 on a $500 device. That's 60%, man. That's a lot.
I have a question.
Okay.
Do you think that they've done the number crunching, which I assume they have, to be like, you know what, people are going to keep their devices a little longer.
Maybe so.
So we can't assume we're going to sell nearly as many every year. And the only way is to really get the people who really don't care how much they're going to cost because they want to upgrade to the newest model every year or whatever. And by raising the prices to these levels, that's who they know that's the long-term strategy. Because like for me, I mean, I buy a phone every 4 or 5 years. So
I mean, I think there's some of that, but if you look at Apple's margins, they're not like I said, they didn't up the margin to 50%.
Mm-hmm.
They're still making the same, 28 to 33, whatever it is, percent margins on these products. They're not gouging. They're not
Yes.
raising prices just for the sake of raising prices. They're spending more on whatever they're spending more on to create these things.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, people are holding on to them longer because they're more expensive, and Apple, I'm sure, is very cognizant of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it more speaks to the fact that they're building more and more luxury products.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not trying to say, okay, what can we do? How can we, maybe we should use aluminum instead of stainless steel like they did with the iPhone XR. That's becoming less of an issue.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying we're building the products we want to build. We're going to make it OLED. We're going to make it stainless steel. We're going to make a iPad with a liquid Retina and 5.9 millimeters thin and 12.9 inch screen, and we're going to charge $1,000 for it. And we don't care.
Mm-hmm.
If people who want to buy it will buy it.
That's true, and yeah, it's getting to the point even now where it's like I'd like to buy a new iPad, but
Yeah, me too.
it's
I mean, the original iPad, when Steve Jobs brought that original iPad on stage, we all expected it to be $799, and it was $499.
yes,
And now it's like, wow, like the Apple finally
that
kind
was
of
a
gets
shock.
it.
Yes,
Yeah. And now they're getting back into where they were before the iPod and before all this, where people say, oh, that's really nice, but I'm not spending that.
yeah,
And, maybe it's a little bit of hubris because they're so big and because they're so rich and because these products are so successful.
mm-hmm.
So we'll see. Customers will respond. If they're too high, customers are going to stop buying them. So we'll see. We'll see what this time next year, what their numbers are, and where people are with with these products and whether or not these prices come down. Maybe this is a test,
yes,
and maybe there is going to hit a wall, and people are going to say, you know what, I'm not spending $800, $900, $1,000 on an iPad. I'm not spending $1,100 on an iPhone. It's too much.
I really believe there is a wall, and
We'll see.
yeah, we'll see. Yeah, it's
Wait till the Mac Pro comes out and it's like $4,000.
oh god, that's terrifying. Is it more? Maybe.
Yeah,
Especially considering the
No.
iMac Pro.
The iMac Pro is $5,000.
Yes, and that's
Starts at $5,000. Maybe the Mac Pro will be the same thing. We don't know.
and that's what I'm thinking. That's really what I'm thinking.
That's
And-
with a 5 creates screen though.
Yeah, that's true. But the trash can starts at like $3,500. I mean, that's not a cheap. There's no $999 or whatever $2,000 model of that. I don't think there is.
Right.
Maybe they recently changed. I don't remember, but it's 3,000 plus the last time I remember looking at it.
Well, in the meantime, I'm not going to bother with
It's
upgrading.
3,000 exactly.
3,000. Yes.
So
So
that's a high point of entry.
yeah. So in the meantime, I'm not going to bother with trying to upgrade my MacBook right now because I have this eGPU. So as a reminder, we do have a giveaway here, teaming up with Razer. Just sign up online on Macworld.com, and and you have until Monday to do that. Get an eGPU. You get a graphics card in this one as well, and then you get a mouse, and you get that for free. So we'll do that. And but we have any more questions?
No, I think a lot of good comments and people are chatting with each other, but I don't think anything I need to. I think we can just wrap up today.
All right. So, yeah, we're going to wrap this up. Roman should be back next week. We'll be back next week on our regular
I have to go
time,
watch
but
Samsung unveil their folding phone.
That's right. He's going to go with the folding phone. How do you feel about that?
We'll talk about that next week. But,
Okay.
We have no idea.
I honestly don't know what to think about it yet. The rumors have been very, very surprisingly light.
It's got to be
We
really
know
awesome.
Samsung itself has basically teased the fact that they're going to announce a folding phone today. That's about all I know about it. So the one that is out there in the wild is just crazy horrible.
Uh-huh.
So we'll see what Samsung does. I mean, this is their big moment. Samsung has a tendency of innovating ahead of schedule, if you
Okay.
will, for lack of a better term, where they come out with something that is before everybody else but isn't quite ready for market, and then 3 to 5 years later Apple comes out and does it better. Will there be a folding iPhone? We'll talk about that next week. But I'm curious to see what they do. I'm not necessarily hopeful that it's going to be a industry-shattering blow-away product.
I got to admit, I know some people argue that, that Samsung often seems to base their stuff on the leaked Apple, what's in the development, on patent
I
stuff,
don't know about
and then they
that.
try to rush it out before Apple actually does it itself. So yeah,
I don't think so. I mean, in Samsung defense, they've been working on this and teasing this since 2014. So
Yes.
I don't think this is a reaction to anything Apple is or isn't doing. This is something they wanted to do for a while, and let's give them their moment. This is a big day for Samsung and the Galaxy, and we'll see what they come out with.
Sounds cool.
I'm anxious to watch to see it. Yeah,
it is definitely. I have to admit, as far as in this space, it's one of the most interesting ideas I've heard, and probably won't end up using it, but it's something that's actually like, wow, it's just, we're talking about something other than cameras and everything.
Yeah, right. I agree with that. It's, we've had these candy bar rectangular slabs for 10 years. Let's do something else. Come on.
So once again, this is episode 629 of the Macworld Podcast. We'll be back next week at a regular time, 10 a.m. Roman should be back with us. Might have Jason, might be us again. Who knows? But
who knows?
We're looking forward, to talking with you again. So if you have anything you want to talk about in the meantime, just let us know, and we'll get onto it. So once again, thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks.